The hall was packed with cameras, journalists, and foreign delegates, every eye locked on the stage where Donald Trump leaned into the microphone. His voice boomed with the familiar confidence that had once filled campaign rallies. "Africa bows to us," he declared, stretching out the words with a grin. "Without us, you have no power, no future. We built the system. You play inside it." There was a murmur among the audience. Some smirked, some shifted uncomfortably, others waited in suspense. In the center row sat African leaders, their faces hardening as the statement echoed. Yet the weight of the moment didn't fall on them, it fell on the man standing to respond, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Traoré rose slowly, in his military uniform, his eyes steady, his jaw set. Cameras zoomed in, and the silence in the room became deafening. He didn't rush. He let the arrogance of Trump's words linger in the air like smoke before cutting through it with his own voice. "We bow to no one," Traoré said, his tone low but carrying, powerful in its restraint. "Africa is not on its knees. We are standing taller than ever. And if you see us rising as bowing, then perhaps you don't understand what strength looks like." The audience gasped. Some clapped nervously, others leaned forward as if not wanting to miss a single word. Trump shifted slightly in his chair, his smirk fading just a little. Traoré stepped closer to the microphone. "You think power is measured by how loudly you declare ownership. But real power is carried in silence, in resilience, in people who choose freedom even when it costs them everything. You claim the system was built by you. Then remember, it was built on our resources, on our labor, on the backs of our people. That time is over. Those chains you think hold us? They've already broken." The hall erupted in scattered applause, some stunned, some emboldened. The battle of words had begun. The tension in the hall only grew after Traoré's sharp words. Trump leaned forward, his hand gripping the podium, clearly unwilling to let the moment slip away from him. His eyes narrowed, and he raised his voice as though volume alone could reassert control. "You talk about chains," Trump sneered, "but without us, you'd have nothing. No markets. No technology. No global stage. The world doesn't listen to Africa, they listen to America. And when America says move, the rest of the world moves. That's how it's always been." The crowd erupted in whispers. Some nodded at the familiar arrogance, while others glanced toward Traoré, waiting to see how he would counter. The air felt electric, charged with both anger and anticipation. Traoré did not flinch. He stood straight, letting Trump's declaration echo for a moment before he replied, his voice sharper this time, resonating with unshaken authority. "You mistake dependence for silence," Traoré began, eyes fixed on Trump. "Africa has been silent because you've forced your hand over our mouths. You tell the world we have nothing, but what you call nothing is everything you take. Our resources fuel your markets. Our land powers your industries. Our people's strength built the wealth you boast about. And you dare to claim we'd be nothing without you?" The audience broke into applause, louder this time. Trump shifted again, the lines in his face tightening. But Traoré wasn't done. He raised his hand slightly, commanding silence once more. "The world listens to whoever speaks with truth. And truth is louder than any empire's arrogance. You claim the world moves when America speaks? Then watch closely. The world is beginning to move when Africa stands." Gasps filled the room. The applause grew stronger, more unified, spreading like fire across the hall. Cameras flashed, capturing every moment. Trump pursed his lips, his bravado tested. The battle wasn't just of words, it was of history, pride, and the future of continents colliding on one stage. The audience could feel the clash building like a storm. Trump, unwilling to show weakness, slammed his hand on the podium. His voice roared across the hall. "Stand all you want," he shouted, "but the truth is simple, Africa survives because America allows it. We give aid, we give trade, we give protection. Without us, chaos would consume you. You think your flags and your speeches mean power? Power comes from control. And America has it. Some in the audience applauded, others hissed. The tension was so thick it felt like the air itself might shatter. Cameras panned to Traoré, waiting to see if he would falter. Instead, his eyes sharpened, and a small, defiant smile appeared on his face. He stepped forward, his boots striking the stage with deliberate force. Chaos, he repeated, his voice calm yet cutting. Chaos is what you left us with. You call it aid, but it is debt. You call it trade, but it is theft. You call it protection, but it is control. And yet, you stand here claiming Africa survives because you allow it? No, Mr. Trump. Africa survives in spite of you. Gasps rippled through the crowd. His words carried weight, unshaken and unafraid. Traoré leaned closer to the microphone, his tone rising like thunder. We do not seek your permission to live. We do not need your chains disguised as help. You speak of control, yet you cannot control the spirit of a people who have decided to rise. And Africa has risen. The hall shook with applause, some delegates standing, others clapping with fierce pride. Trump's face reddened, his hand tightening on the podium. The clash had shifted, the balance of power in the room no longer felt one-sided. This was no longer just a debate, it was a reckoning, a moment where history itself seemed to tilt under the force of words. Trump's jaw tightened, and his voice rose with a mix of frustration and fury. You talk about rising, but rising against who? Against the very nations that built the modern world? Against the alliances that keep the global order? Don't fool yourself, Africa cannot stand alone. Without America's hand, you will crumble. You will beg to return under our wing. And when you do, the world will see who truly holds power. His words hung heavy in the room, dripping with condescension. Some delegates looked uneasy, others angry. The camera zoomed in on Traoré, waiting for his response. Traoré paused, letting silence cut deeper than any rebuttal. Then, with deliberate calm, he spoke, "We do not rise against the world, we rise against the chains you forged to bind it. You claim you built the modern world? Then you built it on our backs, with our gold, our land, our people's sweat. But you forget one truth, a world built on theft cannot stand forever." The crowd erupted with cheers. Traoré lifted his hand slightly, and the room fell quiet again. His tone hardened, his eyes locked on Trump. You say Africa cannot stand alone? We have stood alone before, through storms, through famine, through every attempt to erase us. And yet we remain. Stronger. Unbroken. You speak of power, but true power is not in threats, nor in weapons, nor in empires. True power is in a people who refuse to kneel. The applause swelled, echoing like thunder in the hall. Trump leaned back, visibly unsettled, his bravado slipping for just a moment. The cameras caught it all, every flicker of weakness. This was no longer just a clash of leaders. It was a clash of eras, the arrogance of the old world colliding with the defiance of a new one. Trump's voice thundered again, though the crack of unease in his tone betrayed his frustration. You can dress up your speeches with big words, but speeches don't stop tanks. Speeches don't pay debts. Speeches don't build the satellites, the jets, the weapons that define real power. Africa will always trail behind unless it accepts the guidance of nations like mine. Otherwise, you risk war, and war will crush you. The threat echoed like a cold blade in the air. Delegates shifted uncomfortably, while cameras zoomed in on Traoré, the whole hall waiting for his reply. Traoré straightened, his posture unyielding, his gaze like stone. He let Trump's words linger, then answered with steady defiance, "War? You think we fear war? No, Mr. Trump. We were born into wars not of our making, wars waged on our lands, wars fueled by greed for our resources, wars financed by the very powers you claim bring order. And yet, we are still here. He raised his voice, the cadence of his words striking like drums. You think tanks define power? Then why have tanks fallen before farmers with nothing but will? You think satellites rule the sky? Then why do empires with all the stars in their grasp still collapse? You speak of crushing US with war, yet it is your arrogance that will be crushed. Because Africa does not stand alone. We stand with our ancestors, with our people, with our land. And that is a force no empire can defeat. The hall erupted in roars of applause. Even delegates who had remained neutral now stood to their feet, clapping, cheering, shouting Traoré's name. Cameras captured the moment, a wave of support that rippled far beyond the hall. Trump leaned back, his lips tightening, searching for a counterstrike, but the room had shifted. The battlefield of words was no longer his to command. Trump's patience had worn thin. His voice turned sharp, every word cutting like a blade. You talk about ancestors, land, and pride. But pride doesn't build economies. Pride doesn't feed millions. Pride doesn't pay the soldiers you send to defend those borders you speak of. America pays. America builds. America feeds. That is why, when Africa grows too bold, it collapses back into chaos. You need us more than we ever needed you. The arrogance in his tone filled the hall like smoke, choking the air. Some delegates nodded reluctantly, their silence betraying agreement. The cameras caught their hesitant expressions, as if Trump's words struck at a deep, unspoken fear. But Traoré did not flinch. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice carrying across the hall, steady and unwavering. You mistake pride for weakness. But pride is not empty, it is fuel. It is the reason why men and women who had nothing but hunger still fought and still won. You say America pays? Pays with what? With money taken from others, with resources stolen from our lands, with debts designed to shackle us forever. That is not feeding, that is draining. That is not building, that is exploiting. His voice rose, resonant, commanding. Africa feeds itself with soil that you tried to poison. Africa builds with hands you tried to enslave. And when you say we need you more than you need us, I remind you, your empires crumbled when you lost Africa's gold, Africa's diamonds, Africa's oil. Who, then, truly needs who? The applause exploded like thunder, echoing through the chamber. Traoré's words cut through Trump's claims like fire through dry grass. Even those who had seemed swayed by Trump now clapped, standing tall, their faces alight with conviction. Trump's smile faltered, his grip on the podium tightening. The battle was slipping further from his control. The hall was now alive with energy, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Trump's face grew redder, his hands gripping the podium as though he could crush it. His voice, raised and brimming with fury, rang out, You speak as if Africa holds the world together. But look around you, conflict after conflict, instability, poverty. Without our intervention, without our leadership, Africa falls into darkness. And let me tell you this, darkness does not scare us. We will always step in, whether you like it or not. His words hung in the air like a threat, heavy and domineering. The camera zoomed in on his expression, defiant, unwavering, yet trembling with the effort of trying to hold dominance over a storm he could no longer control. Traoré let the silence build, his eyes scanning the crowd before he spoke. When his words finally came, they were like iron striking stone. You say we fall into darkness? No, Mr. Trump. That darkness you speak of, it was not born here. It was shipped here, in chains, on ships that carried greed, not freedom. It was planted here with borders drawn by hands that never belonged to this land. The instability, the poverty, the conflict you point at with such arrogance, they are the shadows of your interventions, not the absence of them. He stepped closer to the microphone, his voice rising above the restless murmurs of the crowd. And you say you will step in whether we like it or not? Then know this, every time you step in, Africa will rise to push you back. Every attempt to dominate will meet resistance fiercer than the last. And the day is coming when you will no longer have the power to step in at all. The crowd erupted again, this time louder than ever before. Delegates rose, fists in the air, voices thundering Traoré's name. The sound swallowed Trump's scowl, rendering his looming threat smaller than the roar of a continent awakened. Trump's jaw clenched, his knuckles widening on the podium. He tried to raise his voice above the thunderous applause that had shaken the hall, but the sound of Traoré's name echoing in the chamber seemed to swallow him. Finally, he barked into the microphone, "You think resistance makes you strong? Resistance without power is just noise. You cannot outspend us, you cannot outarm us, you cannot outlast us. We have crushed greater nations than yours, and if Africa dares to rise against us, we will crush you too." The words were harsh, almost venomous, and for a brief moment the crowd fell silent, more out of shock than fear. Trump's threat was clear, unflinching, and broadcast to the entire world. His allies nodded with satisfaction, as though he had delivered the final word. But Traoré only lifted his chin, his eyes burning with defiance. When he spoke, his voice carried a force that shook the silence back into life. "You boast of crushing nations? Then know this, you cannot crush what refuses to kneel. You cannot silence what refuses to forget. Africa is not afraid of your armies, your weapons, or your money. Because we have something your empires will never own, our unity, our spirit, our land." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "You call us noise? Then hear this noise grow into thunder. You call us powerless? Then watch as our power is born from the ground itself, from every village, every child, every mother who refuses to let her land be stolen again. You cannot crush a continent that has already survived centuries of your chains. And now, those chains are broken forever." The crowd leapt to its feet, roaring so loud that even the walls of the hall seemed to shake. Delegates pounded the desks with their fists, a chorus of voices rising in solidarity. Trump's words had been meant as a warning, but they had only fanned the flames of resistance that Traoré ignited with every sentence. The camera zoomed in, capturing the sweat on Trump's brow, the stubborn defiance etched into his expression. He tried to recover, raising his hand for silence, but the hall no longer belonged to him. The energy had shifted, and everyone knew it. Still, he forced his words through gritted teeth. "You talk of unity, of chains broken, but unity without strength is meaningless. When the world needs innovation, it turns to us. When the world needs defense, it turns to us. Africa will always follow because it has no choice. And if you keep standing in our way, you'll regret it." The arrogance in his tone sent ripples through the audience. Some delegates shifted uneasily, others looked on with disgust. Trump's threat was clear, but so was the weakness in it, the desperation of a man trying to hold on to an old order slipping away. Traoré stepped forward, not rushing, not raising his voice, but speaking with the calm fire of a man who knew the weight of his words would outlast any threat. "You say Africa has no choice? Look around, Mr. Trump. Look at these nations rising without you. Look at the farmers who feed themselves, the workers who build their own industries, the youth who code their own future. Every day, our choices grow stronger. Every day, your grip weakens." The hall stirred, the murmurs turning into nods, then applause. Traoré's voice grew sharper. "You say the world turns to you for defense. But who defends the world from you? You claim innovation, but your innovation comes at the cost of others' resources. You talk of power, but your power has always depended on the chains you placed on us. And now that those chains are broken, you cannot accept it." The crowd roared again, louder than before, their voices drowning Trump's attempts to respond. In that moment, the hall itself felt transformed, a battlefield where words were sharper than swords, and Traoré's words had struck the deepest blow yet. The room trembled with noise as both leaders stood firm, locked in a duel that was no longer just about words but about visions of the world itself. Trump slammed his hand on the podium, his face flushed with anger. "You think you've made some victory here, Traoré? Words don't win wars. America wins wars. Always has, always will. And when you realize that, when Africa realizes that, you'll come crawling back like all the rest." His words dripped with arrogance, with the old certainty of a superpower used to obedience. Some of his allies clapped, though the sound was drowned out by the jeers echoing across the chamber. Traoré did not flinch. He leaned closer to the microphone, his eyes scanning the entire hall. "Crawling back? You misunderstand us, Mr. Trump. Africa does not crawl. We stand. We rise. And we rise not because of you, but in spite of you." His voice sharpened like a blade. "Your wars won you fear, but they never won you respect. Your victories built empires, but they never built trust. And empires built on fear always fall. Always." The hall erupted, voices shaking the chamber. Some delegates pounded the tables, others chanted Traoré's name. The energy felt unstoppable, as though the ground itself was rumbling with the weight of history. Trump tried to shout over the noise, but the cameras had already captured the moment, the contrast between fury and calm, between the arrogance of power and the defiance of freedom. Traoré raised his fist, his final words cutting through the roar like thunder. "Tell the world this: Africa bows to no empire, Africa fears no threat. And if you want a war of wills, then here we are. Standing. Unbroken. Forever." The roar that followed was deafening, spreading beyond the hall, beyond the city, to every corner of the world watching. In that moment, history wasn't written with weapons, but with words that struck deeper than any blade.